Here we figure out, in a very simple way of describing it, is how do I keep it safe? When we're talking about equipment justification, we are talking about the realization phase. The first step in safety instrumented system design is to select and justify the equipment we are going to use. Now, there's two things we must always remember: the application requirements and the safety integrity requirements. We need to consider both sets of requirements, and of course we must document the justification. What do I mean when I say application requirements? You must ask yourself, is this particular product capable of performing all the needed functions? I know it's more tricky in terms of level meters and flow meters because there are many different ways to measure levels and flows. You must pick the instruments that will actually do the job. You must pick instruments that are rated for the expected environment. You must pick instruments that are compatible with expected process materials and process conditions. And that, of course, applies mainly to equipment that comes in contact with process materials. And you must look at the safety manual and find out if there are any tough restrictions that make the whole project challenging and undoable. You know, a lot of people think it's obvious. All I have to do is read the sales literature, and I can figure out whether this product will do the job for me. Well, I'd like to remind you what I've been told by many of the instrument engineers in our company, that it's harder than that. You've got to recognize that we have products and processes that are complex. And in fact, it is quite easy to miss some critical mismatch between the instrument and the application. And in this case, in the case of a safety instrumented system design, we are depending on these instruments to provide automatic protection for us. Missing a critical mismatch between an instrument and an application is a systematic design mistake and a very serious one. Therefore, many companies have procedures that require instruments be tested in actual process environments. The concept is, buy some of these instruments, put them in a process similar to the one where you're anticipating a safety instrumented system in a non-critical application where the failure is not important, and carefully monitor the performance of these instruments, keeping records of all anomalies and failures. If any failures occur, it's very important that we do root cause analysis. We have to make sure this experience is relevant, and by that we mean that the operational conditions where we test the equipment really needs to be much the same as the operational conditions where we're going to use the equipment in safety applications. I find it to be especially true about field instruments. A couple of particular examples in process control. Think about it. What happens if a valve is being used in a controller? It likely is moving. Sometimes it's even moving continuously. Compare that to a similar valve used in a safety instrumented system application. If the process has been designed well, and we rarely ever get a dangerous condition, that valve may not move for months, maybe years. Those stress conditions are quite different than conditions where a valve is being used in a control application. So be careful to make sure that you're thinking about similar application conditions. If we are comfortable about our application, then the job is safety integrity. We have two alternatives: 61508 certification and process use justification. By the way, I just want to make a point. I'm not eliminating the need for meeting application level requirements by doing safety integrity justification. I view these as two separate things. First of all, you've got to make sure the equipment you choose will perform the correct function in your application environment. That comes first. And on top of that, then, you must justify the safety integrity of the equipment you purchase. There's two ways to do that. Either purchase equipment that has been designed according to IEC 61508, or you may do a prior use justification. Hopefully you'll understand what these terms mean very clearly. I know I get a lot of questions and a lot of emails on this particular subject, so I know it can be confusing. I think one of the areas in the past where it's been confusing is that people were not separating application requirements from safety integrity requirements. They weren't separating application justification from safety integrity justification. And that's why I'm hoping in this particular seminar you can understand a little more clearly by seeing that these are two different things. Now, 61508 product certification. The 61511 standard says one way to justify safety integrity is to purchase equipment that's designed in compliance with IEC 61508. 61508 is a relatively complex standard, and a clean, fully documented way to demonstrate design compliance is to purchase a product that has been certified per IEC 61508. Certification really must be done by a technically competent and well-known third party. I have absolutely seen self-certifications done by manufacturers. These exist on the market, and there's nothing in 61508 that says people can't do that. My own experience, although you've got to admit I'm probably biased, but ignoring my bias for the moment, I've found that 61508 is a very complex standard, and speaking from personal experience, I have to read that standard every single week, and I get involved in long debates with some of our people about exactly what certain sentences mean. And after studying that standard now for 10 years, I'm beginning to feel I understand it. That makes me think, how can anyone who doesn't spend full time studying that standard, how can they even really begin to understand it? So that's one of the reasons I say you really need full-time, technically competent certification assessors. If you have a good certification that will demonstrate that a product has high design quality for hardware, software, and mechanical design, and high manufacturing quality. A good certification assessment will also check to see that the proper end-user documentation is provided, and most of the time that documentation is called the safety manual. If a manufacturer wants to get a product certified, there are fundamentally four barriers. The hardware has to be designed, depending on SIL level, so it has relatively low failure rates, good diagnostics, and a fail-safe design. The design process is probably the biggest barrier, because really 61508 doesn't give any credit for good, competent people. In a way, it assumes that you can't depend on people, and therefore your process and your documents and your verification have to be extremely good. And at the end of the day, we all need that. I know when I was a product developer, I needed someone checking me. I needed a process. I needed a checklist. I still use a checklist today for many of my activities. I'd just like to add that these product barriers are not easy. I can tell you verbally that more than half of the products that apply for 61508 certification fail. They simply don't meet the requirements. Most of them fail because they don't have good, clean, documented designs. In spite of the fact it's tough, more and more products are becoming certified every week. Since certification is a measure of design quality and provides clean safety integrity justification, this chart shows you, by my count, how many products in the world of sensing devices have been 61508 certified as a function of year. And so if you are thinking to yourself, I don't remember seeing any certified pressure transmitters, take a look at the chart. Quite frankly, there weren't very many until about 2 years ago. This is all relatively new thing, and it's good for anyone designing control systems. Taking a look at these pressure transmitters, how did they do it? What does certification mean? Yokogawa, Rosemont, and others have been given a SIL 3 capability rating by Exeter Certification. In order to get this rating, they had to establish hardware, software development processes that met the rigorous SIL 3 requirements. They had to demonstrate and show documented test results, proving that they were following a good design process. They did an FMEDA analysis with extensive fault injection testing. They added features to the product to ensure protection of data. What happens if a memory drops a bit in your transmitter? Does your transmitter detect and correct the problem, or does it simply give you a bad reading? If it's been certified, it's highly unlikely to give you a bad reading. The manufacturers added features to detect microcomputer execution problems. That microcomputer stops executing properly. There are diagnostics, hardware and software, that will detect that. I can't tell you how many times we've tested a transmitter. You kill the microprocessor clock and the output just freezes. That's no good for safety. Quite frankly, it's no good for control either. What happens if that output is frozen and the process starts going up toward the trip point? That automatic protection system won't work. Manufacturers have added a lot of automatic diagnostics to the product to detect almost all of the internal hardware failures. And if you configure your PLC right, you can really use that to not only improve safety, but decrease the false trip rate of your plant. Lastly, they had to create user manuals explaining exactly how to use this product in safety applications. What about mechanical devices? Well, 61511 requires that you justify all of these devices as well. There's no exclusion for solenoid valves and mechanical devices. Companies like ASCO, Bifold, Versa, and others have been given a SIL 3 capability rating by Exeter Certification, and they had to establish their hardware development process, demonstrate a good design process. They had to do FMEDA analysis, fault injection testing, and create users manuals. So I guess the point is, this isn't easy. In spite of that, an awful lot of products are now being certified. Transmitters, PLCs, trip amplifiers, and valves. Remember, certification started with safety PLCs. So when I look at a list of currently certified products that are being actively marketed on the Exeter website, you'll see a wide number of products available from a wide number of manufacturers. You can also see, for example, today there are many manufacturers supplying 61508 certified pressure transmitters. There are many manufacturers specifying 61508 certified flow transmitters and temperature transmitters and level and gas detection and toxic gas detection and flame detectors and whatever else. There are many manufacturers supplying solenoids that are certified, pneumatic actuators that have been certified, and even valves, ball valves, globe valves. It's quite surprising how many products today are available, and that's the essence of all this, is that is a easy and viable choice for justifying equipment. There is a list on Exida.com if you want to see the latest in any of these different product categories. Go check it out anytime you want. Many certification schemes exist on the market. I think the best concept is what we call an open certification scheme, where both the assessment report and the certificate are available publicly and posted on the certification agency website. It's very important, of course, that certifications be done by someone who is very competent, and I must say that experience and expertise in 61508 are the keys behind successful certifications. But what happens? Okay, that's fine and dandy, wonderful, there's lots of products available, but what happens when there is no instrumentation product available with certification? Can you design a safety instrumented system? Well, of course you can. Do you meet the requirements of 61511? Yes, you do. Because one of the options is prior use integrity justification. Well, the first thing you might do is call the manufacturer of the product you're interested in and find out if they're getting a certification, because I assure you there are many certification projects that are actively in progress right now. Prior use justification documentation is a bit of work, and you certainly don't want to do it if you don't have to. If there is no certified product and nothing is on the horizon, you can absolutely take responsibility yourself and set up your own self-certification process. Now, how do you do that? Well, let's look at the requirements of 61511. Clause 11.5.3 talks about appropriate evidence shall be available. All right, what's that? Evidence of suitability shall include consideration of the manufacturer's quality management and configuration management systems, adequate identification of the product, demonstration of performance, and volume of operating experience. Now, we must say that 61511 is not very specific about what these 4 bullets mean. So after a lot of discussions, we've got some recommendations for you. If you want to consider a manufacturer's quality system, for SIL 1, it's recommended that at minimum you verify ISO 9000 certified quality system, verify that they have a documented design process, get FMEDA results for the instrument, and study the safety manual. I do consider safety manual to be a pre-sales document. I mean, if there's some really nasty restriction and you don't know about it before you buy the product, it's going to be a very unpleasant surprise when you read the safety manual after you buy the product. I got a call from an integrator down in the Gulf Coast area of the United States, and he had just opened up the safety manual of a PLC that he had purchased. And he called up and said, "What does this mean?" and read the passage. And I said, "Well, that means you're going to have to use duplicate input modules, and you're going to have to program your own comparison." And he goes, "Oh my God, I don't have room for that. I didn't buy enough equipment." And I was thinking, Okay, well, and his question to me was, tell me how to get around these crazy requirements. And that's not the idea. You must follow the restrictions in the safety manual, or you're likely to build an unsafe system. And unsafe just means it won't meet the requirements of the standard, and why waste your time? Study the safety manual before you buy the product. Get FMEDA results so you can have good, consistent comparisons of failure rates, safe, dangerous failure rates. I would do that as an absolute minimum, even for a SIL 1 justification. For SIL 2, I would do all of the SIL 1 activities, plus a detailed review of the design process. How do they design equipment? How do they test? What documents are produced? How do these compare with good, accepted engineering procedures? There are whole textbooks, even outside of 61508, on how to design software, how to design hardware, and how to do mechanical design. Compare these procedures with such documents. I would review the warranty return data and the field failure feedback system, looking for any chronic problems. And if I'd done that, I'd feel pretty comfortable about the manufacturer's quality system for SIL 2. For SIL 3, I would audit the design and manufacturing process per the standard. And the standard has roughly over 200 specific requirements of things that must be done in the design process. I would verify fault injection testing, because it's just shocking how many unexpected things come from that particular type of testing. Oh, I see a question. Let me check. Question is, can the vendor do the proven in use, or must it be done by the end user? I can't see. Let me just check this. Must it be done by the end user? Yes. And the answer is, it's a common interpretation that prior use justification must be done by the end user. Why? The end user is responsible. The end user takes the risk. Now, a manufacturer can help. A manufacturer can supply FMEDA reports. A manufacturer can supply quality system documents like we just talked about. A manufacturer can supply the detailed record of engineering changes. But in the end user has responsibility for the justification. Now, let's talk about identification. What do we mean, identification? What we're talking about here is changes. For SIL 1, verify that the manufacturer has a good version control system of all mechanical, electronic, and software design changes. Do they have a method for documenting the changes and informing the end user? What happens if you've been using a particular product for 5 years and you've got 1,000 of them out in the field and they've really worked well? And you've done good record keeping and you know they've worked well and they seem to be a prime candidate for prior use justification. And what happens if the manufacturer redesigns the whole thing and puts in all new software between then and now? I think your experience is basically wiped out or partially wiped out. So what do you got to do about that? You have to make sure you understand the engineering change process and that the revisions of hardware, software, and mechanical changes are properly recorded, and you, the purchaser, are informed of all of those changes. For SIL 1, I'd make sure the manufacturer has a version control system and documents what version you are buying. For SIL 2, you should review the detailed engineering history of each part. And for SIL 3, it's recommended that you audit the manufacturer's version history and all field failure feedback. do see another question, but no question has been typed. All right, let's keep moving. What does the standard mean by demonstration of the performance? How do you know when a product fails? We have to think about this. For SIL 1, you should monitor field performance, recording operation conditions and version numbers of all the instruments. Same thing for SIL 2 and SIL 3. We have to understand if the product is working or not working. And that's what I mean by monitor field performance. How much field performance? The fourth bullet point in 61511 is demonstration of the performance. Generally speaking, for SIL 1, you should get 100,000 hours. For SIL 2, you should get 1,000,000 hours. And for SIL 3, you should get 10 million hours. Those numbers come from IEC 61508. There they are. There's another question. Are safety manuals and warranty return data typically available for transmitters and valves? Answer. All certified products should have a safety manual. The manufacturer certainly produced a safety manual during the certification process, and I would guess they are typically available. Now, warranty return data, most of the time in certified products, an FMEDA report is available, and I will tell you that during FMEDA analysis, warranty return data is reviewed, although I will say most manufacturers don't give you that information directly. You would have to go ask for it. Another question. What about manufacturer declaration of conformity? How much trust should we give it? My personal answer, no trust, 0. Why? I'm not convinced that anyone who doesn't work on 61508 assessment full-time can do a good enough job, especially for SIL 2 and SIL 3. Maybe manufacturer's assessment for SIL 1 is a pretty good thing. I must admit I am biased, but there is a reason which I will share with you verbally. I was doing an assessment of a company, and they failed. They barely met the requirements for SIL 1, much less SIL 2 or SIL 3. Sent the report, informed them they failed, and then never heard a word. A few months later, on their website was a self-declaration of conformance to 61508 for SIL 3. I am shocked. Another question. What clause in 61508 gives these unit hours? Answer. I don't remember without looking it up. Maybe that helps prove my point that these particular, the 61508 standard is pretty complex. I think I put in a slide about this. Okay, there it is. In Part 2, Table B6 of 61508, I didn't know you were going to ask that question. I just put this in to remind myself where it was. Let me just check the questions again. Okay, I think we're up to date there. They define low effectiveness as, okay, they define it as 10,000 hours of operation, at least 1 year of experience, with at least 10 devices in different applications. Statistical accuracy claims should be 95%. No safety critical failures. And actually, if you sit down and look at statistical accuracy of 95%, you need more like 100,000 hours. That's where I got that number. The 10 million hours comes from the high effectiveness column of Table B6, And it also says 2 years experience with at least 10 devices in different applications, and statistical accuracy should be 99.9. And actually that pretty much leads me to conclude that I need more like 30 million operating hours. There's absolutely no numbers of hours required and stated in 61511. Therefore, I turned back to 61508 for some guidance. When I'm involved in a certification assessment, these are the kinds of numbers that I demand before I will accept a prior use evidence from a manufacturer. Now, what do we mean by monitoring field performance with no dangerous failures? That is the objective, isn't it? I have to ask you, how do you know a dangerous failure has occurred? In a safety system, if there's no dangerous condition, and a transmitter output is frozen, for example, how do you know it's frozen? Well, number one, there could be internal self-diagnostics, and that's exactly what the certified products have. But other than that, you must do a proof test. You must go out and check to see that it's still working. So it's important to remember that in many cases, dangerous failures are only recognized by doing a proof test. The proof test procedures must be carefully designed to detect any potentially dangerous failures. And I've seen some pretty lousy proof tests. You know, go out and press the button and see if the bell rings. Well, that may or may not be effective. Proof test records must be kept. It's not good enough to go out and do the test. You have to write down that you did it, and most importantly, if you detect something wrong, you really need to fix it and analyze what happened. And I know that can be painful. I had an automatic diagnostic fire on one of my own protection systems lately, and I don't have time to go check what happened. Oh, I shouldn't admit this, but I just pressed the alarm acknowledge, and I hope I don't forget about it before I get another diagnostic. I hope you guys in the field do a much more serious job with your systems than mine. Of course, this is just my basement flood system, but so my consequences aren't that bad. So what do you got to do here? You got to do proof tests. You got to have good proof tests. You got to keep records. And when you get failures, you got to analyze them. You also have to pay attention to those automatic diagnostics. When you get an alert or some kind of other diagnostic alarm, you have to go resolve the issue. Okay, I promise I will go back tonight and find out what the error code meant. It said something about battery is going bad, so maybe I got a bad battery. Now, what I really need is an online AMS system in my home protection system, so I can just automatically log all these alerts. Anyway, keep track of things that really fail. When you're doing your prior use justification, of course, you have to document your justification. I like using tools whenever possible, and I often will use, when I'm asked to help a customer do a prior use justification, I will often use the prior use report generator from the Excellentia tool. There's a screen of questions where you answer yes or no. There's a place where you enter data, and it will automatically format and generate a pretty nice prior use justification report for you. You have a choice for safety integrity justification. You can buy certified products, or you can do your own self-certification program. The standard does not prohibit you from going either way. Most important thing, document your self-justification. Make sure if there's ever an accident, and if you're ever called on the carpet, you will have all your paperwork ready to go. In general, I've found that many of the jobs we're working on with end users, things are going a lot more smoothly in the last 2 years because there are so many certified products. And all you have to do is keep a copy of the certificate in the project file. At least that's what I do. And I was just reading it. Another question came in. If proven in use is done by the end user, how do you handle items being used for the first time? The answer is you can't. Don't use brand new equipment. Equipment with you've had no experience in safety critical applications. Don't do it unless it's been certified. That's just a real bad idea. That's why you got to use proven in use or certification for safety integrity. In fact, when you think about the application requirements, you really ought to do some kind of non-critical testing of all instruments before you use them in safety critical applications. Anybody else have any other questions? Just double checking again. Looks like I've got them all for now. Let me just say there are additional papers on Exida website. There are additional resources where you can read all about this. Please feel free to help yourself. These are all downloadable free of charge. If anybody has any other specific questions, you can send an email in to info@exida.com, or you can even send one to my email address. The first part is one word, WGOBLE@exida.com, and I'll try to give you an answer. We do expect to have these slides posted on the website within a few hours. Check the questions one more time. Nothing new. Well, let me thank everybody for attending today. I hope this has been of some usefulness to you. I have found a lot of confusion about the prior use versus certification, and I view them as things that are alternatives only for safety integrity. Neither eliminates the need for application level justification. And please be careful of all the equipment that you specify for use in safety instrumented systems, because we depend on these automatic systems to give us protection. People, environment, and in many, many cases, economics is the most significant risk of all, especially in a down economy. Thank you all very much for attending. If you have any, I see a couple more questions. Okay. One more. If we cannot use items for the first time, can end user, I'll just interpret this, can I take advantage of someone else's experience? And the answer is, if someone else has done a good job doing all the things we talked about in this seminar, and if they can provide you with such documentation, you must choose whether to accept that and take responsibility based on the other person's documentation. It's my opinion that there's absolutely nothing in the standard that prevents you from doing that. And if you can imagine yourself defending your position in a court of law someday using these other documents, go right ahead. I'm not sure it's that bad. I think it's a real good idea to get information from other users. But I still think you got to do your own application justification. All right, thanks everyone, and you can look up slides later. Take care. Bye-bye.